start with the second, towards the middle of the second handout, because I wanted to kind of divide it based on what is considered the axial skeleton and appendicular. So we are currently on the appendicular skeleton. Now, unfortunately, your book puts this guy in the additional axial skeleton section, but it's not. So if you see, this guy is an S looking, right? Looks kind of on here, this kind of flattish looking bone here, that's this S shape, and that's what's known as the clavicle. So if we come over to my bud again, you will notice this that comes out right here, that one side of it is an articulation with the sternum, and the other side of it is an articulation with the acromion process that is on the scapula. So this is actually part of the appendicular skeleton. The next thing that we're going to look at is actually the scapula, which is this guy right here, which makes our shoulder blade, right? And you can see that it is this really nice bone that it's part of what makes this articulation or shoulder joint, right? You have the clavicle here, you have the scapula here, and this is your humerus that falls in there for your shoulder. And so we are going to take this and kind of pull it off and look at that. So, put him about right there so you can see him. This is the scapula. And so you can see that on one side of it, it's just nice and flat and kind of does this little shallow indentation. And then the other side of it has this kind of formation that comes off of it. So this is the one that we're going to focus on first. And this you can find in 8.13. And this is what's known as the spine. And so the spine comes off of this main bone, and the very end of it's what's known as the acromion, or the acromion process. And you could see that very nicely up here when we're looking at this bone. The spine is on the back that you can see, and then it comes up to that end part, which is the acromion process. That's at the top of where the shoulder is. So basically, when you're talking about your shoulder that's up here, it's that part that you're actually touching at the top part of that, right? Now, if you go in, you'll notice that this is the part that actually is the joint or deep inside the joint itself. And this little area here that you can see, it kind of dips in a little bit. And this is what's known as the glenoid fossa or glenoid cavity, depending on which one. I learned it as the fossa, and in your book it says cavity. So that is this area right here. Now on kind of what you can say towards the front, if you're looking at this, you can see here, kind of move you up closer, right? Here is that fossa that you can see the humerus that we're going to learn about in a few minutes is attached in there. And then you can see that there is this small kind of area that comes off right here, right? Kind of going through, you can see that's right there. And to me, it kind of looks like a little bitty thumb that comes up. You see that guy that's right there? And that is what's known as the coracoid process. And it makes me think of a thumb up that is essentially on there, right? So what you want to know, the full bone itself, the entire thing is a scapula, and it's made up of the following bones: the spine, the acromion process, the glenoid fossa, and the coracoid process. So now that we're done with that, let's go to let's go to the hip girdle that's right over there. And so the hip girdle is this area that's right here, and it comes into articulation with the sacrum that we've already learned about on the vertebral column. And so if you notice that there is kind of this area, let me get really close here, that you can see here, that this is the sacrum and this is the actual bone, pelvic bone. So if I were to pull this off, this is kind of what it looks like. And this is one of the more confusing bones for students. And I tell them you don't have to be confused by this if you just look at it holistically. You'll notice on this side that it's kind of smooth and rough. And then if you go on the other side, it's all smooth. That's how you can get some orientation into where you are, right? And so let's go here and start with this. This part that's really rough is what is coming in contact with the sacrum. And it makes sense because the sacrum is rough and has some of these edges that are around it, where all of this is what you feel kind of out here on the side with your hips. So this can kind of give you orientation on where you're looking at. Now, this entire bone is made up of two bones. The top part where this is, that goes across, is known as the ilium. And then what's on the bottom here, where you can see the big hole and all that below it, is the ischium, right? And so when we talk about the individual parts of these bones, it's going to start with either iliac for the ilium or ischium for the or ischial for the ischium. Okay, so don't be confused by that. So this whole thing is the ilium, and this part that's right here that almost looks like it's the top of a wave that's going to crash down is called the ilium or iliac crest. So that is this, ilium or iliac crest. Now here, it looks like it dips down. If you can see, like my hand goes like this when it's in there. And a little bit of water could pool in there. And so that is what's known as the ilium or iliac fossa. So ilium, iliac crest, ilium or iliac fossa, right? So if something were to ask like, hey, this crest is part of one bone, you would say something like the ilium. Or, you know, if they're like, this tuberosity is part of what bone, you would say the ischium, right? So let's now go to the ischium, which is down here. Now, when you're looking at this, you can very easily go, okay, well, let me go around, kind of point things out and go, okay, this is the rough side. Let's go below the rough side. And there is what looks like a heart here, right? Well, this heart is what's called the greater sciatic notch. And if you notice, that is back here. Let me see. Do you see that? And this is where the sciatic nerve can easily go through. So it looks like a half a heart, is how I tell people. Now on the end of that heart, there's this kind of notch that comes up. And this is what's known as the ischial spine. And it looks just kind of like a spine on, you could go doo-doo, 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 jaws if you don't know. But like the spine of a shark, you know, something like that. It's kind of sharp there. So this is the greater sciatic notch. And this is the ischial spine. Now from there you can go down from the spine and look at this rough area that's here. So I always look and think about rough areas, right? So I have this rough area here, and then below the rough area is the greater sciatic notch. Below that is the ischial spine. And then if I keep going down from that, again, it's rough. That is the ischial tuberosity. And if you guys look at this, it makes sense. Let me show you. This was all the rough stuff here, right? So if you go from where the rough stuff is, where that articulation is, below that is this. So let me flip it around for you, just so you can see the butt part. So this is the back right here. That is that half heart that's there, which means this little pokey part right here is the spine. And if you go down farther, this is the rough part. Remember when you used to sit on your parents' lap and they would say, oh my God, your butt is so bony. It is just cutting into my leg. That was your ischial tuberosity making their life terrible at that point, and that is what you're sitting on and essentially will end up hurting your parent's leg. Now, if we want to go, and now let's look, do you notice how this one is rough, right? And then basically what you can do is let's flip around to the side that actually has this little notch in it. And that is there so that your femur can fit into that spot, right? So what we're looking at for there, we have the femur that fits into this right there, right? You have your tuberosity that's back there. And so from here, we're going to the front here. And so if you're looking at it in the handout, right, you have this here, that is that rough spot. And then they're showing you this that's here in the front, being basically your pubic body, and this being the pubis, basically. And so what that is this that's down here. So pubis is here. So if you go put this back here, right? And we were looking at it and we're like, okay, we're on this back side here. We're looking at this that comes out. This is the pubis right here. When you put this back and you put it in here, this is what's up here. And how can you remember this? Well, because if you look between it, then right here is the symphysis pubis. This symphysis, and we're going to talk about joints after our lab practicals, this is the joint. So if you're looking at the symphysis pubis, then the pubis must be close to it, which is the area that is right by it. Now, if you look at this guy, and let me get, or should probably not say guy, if you look at this individual here, you'll notice that this makes this arch area that's here, right? So the pubis come together with the symphysis pubis here to make the pubic arch. And so let me